folks, I want to go in and review some of the questions from our legal reasoning. And there's a couple that came up with as questions that people have had that have sent me. And so I'll just kind of pick and choose through here. I'm going to use my check my work just in case when I talk and do things, I tend to click on wrong things. So just to make sure that we're good with this. I will do the check my work to make sure I'm giving you the right answer as we're going through this. So Scott Jensen owned 200 acres of farmland in California. A creek flowed through the land, and Jensen used water from the creek to irrigate his crops. The water was adequate for his needs. Wesley Surveys purchased farmland upstream from Jensen's property and began using water from the creek to irrigate, claiming that he had exclusive rights to the water. Jensen filed a lawsuit in California State Court against Survey for the water. The court held that Jensen and Service had to divide their water use equally and that each of them was entitled to use water every other week, which is just kind of strange, but these are arguments that exist. 50 years later, a similar dispute arose between two more California farmers. Bo Ellis lived upstream from Faye Deason. Deason claimed that she had exclusive rights to the water and filed a lawsuit in California State against Ellis for use of the water. In the second case, Deason versus Ellis, the court most likely will. And in this case, it's applying stare decisis, which means stand on prior ground or stand on decisions that were made previous, which is another word for legal precedent. So in this case, they would apply stare decisis and divide the water rights because the facts of the two cases are similar. So that would be the correct answer. I'll check my work, and we got that one right. All right, freedom of speech is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. In 1989, the U.S. Supreme Court held that burning the American flag is protected as symbolic speech under the U.S. Constitution. In a renewed response to individuals burning the American flag at political events, Congress enacts a statute in March 2016 that prohibits burning the American flag, which shall constitute a criminal offense. The state of Texas also enacts a state statute that mirrors the federal statute in June of 2016. After the federal and state statutes are enacted, Don sets an American flag on fire at a political event in Texas. He's arrested and charged with violating Texas law. As a defense, Don is claiming symbolic speech is protected by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. The court should find what? In this case, what happens, and this happens like not as blatantly obvious, but for other cases, and we can use the travel ban as an example, Congress will create a law, and sometimes the U.S. Supreme Court will find it unconstitutional because it is a right protected by in the Constitution, specifically in the amendments. So in this case, it said that it was protected, and it was held up in 1989, which is a landmark case. It's legal precedent. So enacting a law by Congress means that that law that Congress enacted is likely unconstitutional. Texas enacted the same law in support of Congress's law, but really didn't need to because federal law would supersede it anyway. But in this case, they would find it to be unconstitutional, and so he'd be not guilty because it is a protected speech. So this would probably have gone to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they would have found that that law by Congress would have been unconstitutional. So the Texas law really didn't matter at all in this case. It's really the federal statute and whether the federal statute was constitutional or not. All right. In the third case, Jones, an employer of Carey Chemical, was injured at work when chemicals entered through a hole in his protective eyewear. Because the nearest eye wash station was inoperable at the time, he suffers from partial blindness due to the effects of the chemicals. Jones brings suit against Carey Chemical for the accident. The judge in this case will likely find, and in this case would probably award damages to Jones based on administrative law. And if you remember, the administrative law that protects workers at work from safety issues is OSHA. So the OSHA law is an administrative law administered by an administrative body, and that is where and why they would award damages. So that is Chapter 1. Go ahead and do Chapter 2, and I'll probably pause the video after that because it will get long, and this will be easy to watch. So for Chapter 2, we've got a couple of ethical cases. In this case, George Geary was employed as a sales representative by the U.S. Steel Corp. The company adopted a written code of conduct that outlined examples of illegal and unethical behavior, as well as examples of positive ethical behavior. One example covered was illegal and unethical behavior of fraudulent accounting. The company has a toll-free phone number for employees to confidentially report illegal or unethical conduct within the company. Gary, who did not have a strong background in accounting, believed that accounting fraud may be occurring, and if not stopped soon, would create a significant harm to the company. Gary called the toll-free number to report his concern, and an investigation was conducted and concluded that no accounting fraud had occurred. Gary had what? In this case, he fulfilled his ethical obligations as a salesperson because he followed company policy concerning illegal or unethical conduct. So even if you're not sure or if you're wrong, you should still report it. And that's really your ethical duty, is to report something that just seems a little bit off to you. Even if it's wrong, it's not going to hurt anybody to do that investigation. Okay. Matthew worked at a courthouse as a bailiff. His fiancee Lisa worked for an airline whose responsibility was to mail frequent flyer vouchers to customers. On a number of occasions, Lisa would take a few vouchers for herself instead of mailing them out and then give them to Matthew to sell. As they planned to use the money for their honeymoon, the actual passengers were not harmed and did not complain of the deception. Lisa and Matthew's behavior is clearly unethical, right? And it's because their actions constituted theft from the airlines, right? Not unethical because passengers did not suffer monetary damages, but unethical because it was theft from the airlines. All right, the last one. Tom and Cindy devise a plan for their company that will force their suppliers to sell them significantly below standards. Under their plan, the suppliers will be powerless to refuse. The company stands to save millions of dollars. When they propose the plan to their manager, Jack, however, is skeptical about the sustainability of such a plan and reluctant to act on it. If other companies were to also put such a plan in place, it would be detrimental to the entire industry. Jack's reasoning is based on, and I believe it's Kant's categorical imperative, which really is the greater good for everybody. And what is the greater good? And as he's talking about detrimental to the entire industry, that's where that kind of greater good concept comes into play. All right, so that is chapter 1 and 2.